Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center, and welcome to Knife AQ episode 117, the knife series where I answer all your questions, whether they're sharp or dull. And this week, amongst our questions, we're taking a look at some fidget-friendly gentlemen's knives, as well as taking a look at some of your answers to one of our previous week's questions. Let's get into it. All right, folks, if you're new to this series, welcome, one and all. We're glad you're here. Well, I am anyway. I don't know about Thomas behind the camera there. He's a bit of a curmudgeon.
Is it time for beer yet?
Soon. Shut up. Hush over there. Anyway, welcome to the series. What we do is we take a look at our comments section below these videos and we pull some of your questions to feature. So if you have a question, you'd like it answered, if you want a shot at that, drop it in the comments below. First question today comes from Bitter Comments. I'm a lawyer who I'm a lawyer who plays with my knife in my office to relieve stress. I love my AD 20.5, I have one right here, but I want a gentleman's folder that's also fidget friendly. I also want one made outside of China. Taiwan is okay though. I can understand that. The 20.5 is an excellent knife. It is very fidget friendly with its shark lock, which happens to also be very strong. So it's not just a gimmick in service of that fidget factor. But even the fancier versions like this knurled titanium version, a little bit aggressive. So I understand that. But I'm gonna try to find some things for you here that maintain what I like about the fidgetability and utility of the AD 20.5 in a more kind of refined package. What do you get with the 20.5? Well, you get the shark lock. You get the ability to, from the spine, open and close the blade with just some wrist action. You don't ever have to touch the blade. You don't even have to cross your fingers in front of the sharp edge when the blade is closing. It is a finger-safe lock style. So both of those are really good. It's ambidextrous. You can do it with either hand, which is really cool. You do have a couple other fidgety options as well with the hole cutout and the thumb stud. So you can open it a few different ways, get a little bit of extra satisfaction out of it. Nothing here is going to hit thumb studs and a blade cutout, but some other things we'll try to get for you. The most obvious option, I think, would be Sandrin knives with something like their Torino. Has a lock that's operated very similarly. This is the recoil lock. Technically under the skin, they're a little bit different than the shark lock, but has some of the same advantages. Ambidextrous, finger safe, and fidget friendly. This is the carbon fiber version, which sometimes tends to be the default, Gents knife material sometimes. There's also a red G10 version. It's a little more gaudy. You could also check out the Monza. It's a larger knife with a titanium frame with some real fine milling. That could also be a good option. We'll try to get some B-roll here of it since I don't have one on this day we're filming. But that also has this same style of lock. The Torino is a good size. I think Gents knives tend to work best when they're a little bit smaller than some of the larger things out there. The blade here at that 3-inch mark. And of course, whether you're a man or a lady, any gentleman could enjoy these styles of knives. Just want to put that out there as well.
You also don't want to make the paralegals nervous.
There is that. I think that's at the heart of the question he's getting at too. So this is an option, a very cool option. But you got carbon fiber, you've got a deep carry pocket clip. I believe it's cast. I used to say it was milled. I'm not actually sure, but it is a solid piece. It's not like a folded style clip, or not a typical folded style clip. And the blade material here is a tungsten carbide, polyhedral tungsten carbide, not steel. Very hard stuff, holds an edge for an exceedingly long time. It will go dull eventually, and you'll have to use some high-end diamond abrasives to bring it back to life in those instances. But until then, man, you've got a screaming sharp edge on a very thin blade stock. Fidget-wise, you do have thumb studs in addition to the lock mechanism. You can reverse flick it or thumb flick it standard style. You could do stuff like hold the blade and kick it out that way. You've got options, but you can still get some big work done provided you're not twisting you're putting too much torque or sideways lateral stress on the blade, because you do have a nice full grip thanks to the finger choil there. Pretty cool knife. Another lock you could look at is Spyderco's compression lock. Here is the Ikuchi. This is a Taiwan-made knife. The Sandrin, I should mention, is made in Italy. Italy is always the denotation of fine things in life, is it not? But back to the Ikuchi, Taiwan-made, price, I didn't mention, about $300 for the Sandrin. This Ikuchi comes in about $170. You've got an S30V blade, 3¼ inches long, slender, trailing point style. A little bit more refined, a little bit more sex appeal, shall we say. Definitely still nice and pokey, and with the full flat grind here, you've got a pretty slicey geometry going on. You have carbon fiber handles with a bit of texture, so you've got good grip. Wire pocket clip, which looks super classy outside of, when in the pocket from the outside looking in. A very subtle presentation, almost completely deep carry and reversible. Speaking of reversibility, the compression lock there, it is spine operated. It's not as easily ambidextrous as the recoil lock or the shark lock there. It's doable, but one-handed I'd get pretty nervous, but I'm not a left-hander. Granted, they do make some left-hand models of the compression lock knives, but this is not one of them, unfortunately. As far as fidgetiness, there is just one, I was about to say just one opening method. There are two, because you can push the tab of the compression lock in and do the wrist flick thing very easily, but you've also got this rounded flipper, which works exceptionally well. It's nice because it doesn't stick out when it's closed, so you've got a very clean profile in the pocket, not going to bump into too many other things, and it's very easy to catch. You don't have to be at exactly the right angle every time. Because of it, you can just hit it and go. Pretty darn cool. If you want a slightly larger gentleman's knife, like I mentioned, I tend to prefer my fancy knives, my formal knives, a little bit smaller than some others in my collection, but that's not the only way. Of course, check out the Kapara, also made in Taiwan, with an S30V blade. 246 for this, 3.6 inches on that blade, full flat grind. Definitely a bit more, what's the word? I was about to say more out there design. It's not exceptionally out there, but it's maybe a little more, or a little less elegant than the Ikuchi, because that's just a crazy elegant set of curves on that particular knife. But again, carbon fiber. You've got a red G10 backspacer, that same wire clip. You've got the wrist flicky action. You've got the thumb hole, which also works with your fingers in the reverse flick. So you've got fidgety that way going on really nicely. These things are really cool and can flex into the bigger work category if needed. You've got some contouring to those handles and a little bit of thickness, so it provides a great grip, and you've got plenty of length for some bigger tasks if needed. You could also check out the axis lock or other crossbar lock things is out there. But two here, it's kind of a template laid down by the Benchmade 940-1. Although some of the aluminum anodized 940s would equally fit this Gents category. But this version right here, the 940-1, pairs carbon fiber with blue accents and an S90V blade. So great, great edge retention from a steel material. It's not going to equal the polyhedral tungsten carbide at the Sandrin. It's going to be easier to sharpen. 3.4 inches on that blade, $315. Again, a little bit more fantastical, perhaps, in its overall shape, its overall outlines. In fact, the Kapara is kind of an interesting comparison to this particular knife, I think. But it's kind of a classic answer to the hard-working gentleman's knife category, or that question. And this is very fidget-friendly as well. With the crossbar-style lock, you've got that thing going on with the wrist flicks. You've got a pair of thumb studs. I haven't actually ever tried to reverse flick a 940. Let's try it now. Can be done.
For the first time ever.
For the first time ever. It does come with a black oxide pocket clip, kind of a standard fit, but if you wanted a deep carry clip, there's plenty of aftermarket stuff. There's even plenty other Benchmades that have a more deep carry clip that you might be able to swap over to. Feels good. very narrow in the pocket when it's closed, despite its 3.4-inch length, so you've got a lot of capability in a small frame. But this same kind of bag of ingredients has also been applied to other knives, and I think the bug out, whether you go with the full size with its 3.25-inch blade or the mini with its sub 3-inch blade in this same config, are both great options. This is the full size. The profile of the bug out is definitely more neutral, kind of less out there than the 940, and as such may be a little more office acceptable. You know your office, you know whether that's true for you or not. You've got a thinner blade with a high flat grind, a great slicer, great for office and just all around EDC stuff. You get a little more extra blue on this one too. Reversible pocket clip on actually all of these knives so far. I should have mentioned some of that. Same deal with the pocket clip here. Here is one of those black deep carry pocket clips that would be compatible on the 940. But if, again, black is not your thing, there's shiny versions out there that you can get. There's anodized titanium stuff that the aftermarket can supply as well. Again, keep that in mind too. One other crossbar locking knife I'll show is the Gerber Savvy. It's kind of similar in size and mission profile perhaps as the Benchmade 940. There is a carbon fiber version of this for about $250, but I'm showing you the aluminum one for $199.99 right now, just because I happen to really like this particular blue. It's got a great color, looks great against the copper and brass style accents. You've got that crossbar lock that feels really good. It has almost like a damped feel compared to the slightly clickier feel of the Benchmade. You see what I mean? Feels really good. Almost like it's couched in luxury, perhaps. Pocket clip on this one is not deep carry, and as far as I know, I've not really seen any replacement clips out there. So if that's a prerequisite for your Gents knife, this one might be DQ'd for that. But it is reversible. It has a single thumb stud, but that thumb stud can be unscrewed and reversed if you'd rather have it on the left side. But it feels great. One of the most stable crossbar locks in the open position on the market, and that's thanks to these oversized washers that you can actually see peeking out with that copper there on the spine. Very, very cool touch. I love that Gerber's making these, and I love that they're making these in their USA shop too, kind of their skunk works, if you will. It's kind of their special project USA shop. Cool stuff. And last but not least, I didn't show, well, the Akuchi is a flipper, but there are plenty of fidget-friendly, frame lock and liner locking flippers out there. But again, I was trying to go for some of the same qualities that you liked, or that I'm assuming you like in your 20.5, the ambidextrous nature being a big part of that. The compression lock doesn't quite hit that, but let's talk about the button lock and the ProTech Malibu. Now, you can debate whether some of the more base versions of this feel gentlemanly or not. That's fair, but they do plenty of fancier versions out there. And despite the whole industry going after the Malibu and going after what Dave at ProTech has been able to accomplish with their button lock action, the Malibu is still about the most satisfying button lock flipper out there that I have felt. And I have felt pretty much all of them that come through here. Works great for lefties too, better than a compression lock does, because it's very easy to actuate that button, if I can find it, with that left hand as well. Cool stuff. Not so much in the way of fidget friendliness in terms of thumb or finger opening options. This is a flipper or flicker with your wrist in either case. These are a bit over $200 typically. Depending on which versions you get, they go up from there, of course. Fantastic knives. All right, now we come to our next question, which falls into our measured once, cut twice segment. And this has to do with Brian S. from last week, the ski coach who was looking for a knife to carry that he could use to scrape snow off his boots, etc. And you folks had a lot of good stuff in the comments regarding this question, extra suggestions, talking points, that sort of thing. So I want to take this opportunity to talk about those things. Here's the question again, skimmed. Brian S. I'm a ski coach, scraping snow off the bottom of my boots regularly. Use this knife with gloves or mittens. Need to keep it in my pocket and absolutely can't open even when I fall. It will get wet and cold, so something with corrosion resistance. Smaller and lightweight preferred, less expensive preferred, but pay what needs to be paid to get what you need. This was fun, and I'm gonna kind of highlight some of the talking points like I mentioned, because it kind of helps show the things I kind of have to think about when I'm trying to answer these questions. It's kind of the back door into the process in a way. A couple people, Kevin Mogi, Brian Whitelaw, Brian Reinbold, all suggested something like, why not a pry bar? Maybe something like this Maverick Customs pry bar right here. There's plenty of stuff out there. This is like $175. This is definitely a more premium type of EDC thing, but there's no sharp edge to worry about poking you in any sort of way, and it's just a hard, not quite sharp. I was about to say sharp, that's the wrong word, but something that could scrape snow quite easily. And there is a certain argument to be made that, maybe the knife isn't the best choice for this scenario, but Brian was asking for a knife, so I wanted to try and get him a good option at least for that. But some other alternatives that aren't a pry bar even, a lot of people mentioned something like a screwdriver that has the advantage of a nice big chunky handle that's usually, plastic or injection molded, so you don't have to worry so much about temperature there, or just, the ski poles that you're probably gonna have on you anyway. Those were some good suggestions, and the argument could be made those might be the better tool for the job, but we're still gonna try to find a knife here. I did recommend the Benchmade Mini Barrage because it had a secondary safety that would absolutely lock the blade closed. It had assisted opening, which could help with numbed or slightly numbed fingers, that sort of thing. But we are talking about a wet, snowy environment. Folders still could freeze. So it's a hard thing, and there's not a lot of good pocketable fixed blade options. You mentioned this has to go in your pocket. That's the thing with a question like this. There's so many different criteria. You might find something that feels perfect, and then you say, oh, it fails on this account. And we're going to go through some of that. But like I said, lots of good suggestions. Graham Blackall suggested the square-tipped Benchmade Triage. Only problem with that is they don't make them anymore, unfortunately. Nor do they make the square-tipped Boost, which would have been even a better option, I think, than the automatic Triage, because autos can get into a little bit more of a can of worms in certain areas, and I didn't want to make that as a suggestion. But the Boost would have been good. Something like the Hogue Trauma would be as close to the Triage that you're talking about that I think is still on the market. And I thought about this because the blunt tip here would help possibly prevent some piercing, and it would make a good wedge for scraping, but no secondary safety on this knife. This is a fully manual knife. And as much as I love a crossbar lock, it is my preferred lock of choice, it doesn't have a super strong detent to keep close. It does have a bias towards closure, but if you're falling down a hillside, there's all kinds of forces going on that are going to be almost impossible to predict, and it would be, I think, very easy for this to come open unexpectedly. And even though there's no sharp tip, there still is sharp edges. Makes me a little squeamish. So don't think that's the way I would recommend, but it was a good suggestion nonetheless. A few people brought up Hogue's button locks. They do come with a secondary safety, like on this EX04 or 03? I forget. Shoot. Sorry, Hogue. EX03. Cool knife. Only problem with this particular situation is that secondary safety only works in the open position. So it's great if you want to prevent yourself from accidentally actuating the button lock, but doesn't keep the blade closed, which is essential for this particular use case. Otherwise, cool option. What's next? We have Callan Davidson recommended something like the Spyderco Autonomy, worried that a crossbar lock might be difficult to operate with gloves on. And depending on how deep the crossbar itself is, I could certainly get that. I could certainly see that. Again, we run into the automatic problem, but this would be a great option if an auto is okay where you live or operate your business. $245. You've got H1 steel, which is pretty much rust proof. Great thing right there. It has a secondary safety that works both open and closed, so you're not going to accidentally open it that way. And it has a real good, nice oversized button there that you'll be able to hit no matter what you've got protecting your fingers, I would say. And plenty of grip too. So that would be a cool option, I think. Plus, in a snowy environment, the orange might help you with visibility if you do happen to drop it. On the subject of H1 steel, several people, too many to mention, brought up the Spyderco salt knives. And this is one where we're getting into, these last two suggestions are getting into a territory where I could see it working, but there's like one thing that held me back just a little bit. But I think these last two are the best of the recommended options from the comments section. But specifically the Salt 2 with its LC200N blade that is slightly more blunted than the Delica upon which this profile is based. About 125 bucks for this, so not terribly expensive, not cheap, but certainly less expensive than some of the stuff we're showing here and less expensive than the Benchmade that I recommended too. Bright green, visibility is gonna be nice. Very easy, I think, to operate, at least opening with that thumb hole, even if you have gloves on. The backlock might be a little bit trickier, but the reason that this one ultimately, I didn't put it on the table is, again, if you're tumbling down, I really wanted to prioritize something with that secondary safety. And the backlocks on these Spydercos do have a very strong bias towards closure, but again, tumbling down the hill, I could see that opening up. I mean, I've seen knives like this get dropped onto a floor and the blade pops open a bit. It can happen. Is it unlikely? Perhaps. I can't say for sure, but if you are gonna go with a salt knife like this, keep that in mind. That's why we said in last week's video, we're not lawyers and we can't absolutely 100% absolutely till the end of time guarantee that these knives won't open if you're tumbling down a hillside. So make sure that's still explicit.
Check with our first comment if you have doubt.
Our first comment, what?
He was a lawyer.
Oh, yes, that's true. Maybe talk to Bitter Comments about this. I don't know if he practices snow law, however. Last one suggestion I want to bring up, Ricky Hurt. A few people mentioned this actually, and I should have written their names down too, so don't mean to exclude anyone else that did, but a lot of people, a handful of people at least recommended an Opinel as something they see commonly used for this type of thing in France especially. And I'll sort of agree with a caveat, and that would be go with the synthetic handled version. Stainless steel blade and the wood is not less likely to react to the extreme temperatures that you may encounter here. Plus you get some color like the orange here, again, which could help, and you get a whistle, which could also be helpful in an emergency. But again, this is one I did consider, but ultimately the thing that did hold me back just a little bit is if you are dealing with gloves, yes, this ring here can provide a positive closure or a lock on closure, but this can get loose over time, so there's no guarantee it's actually gonna stay put, and it also might be a little fiddlier to operate in heavy gloves. Although the blade does have the advantage of this cutout, which will help in that gloved situation. But again, honestly, not a bad recommendation, and at 40 bucks, very easily replaceable if something were to happen to it. So, round of applause to the comments section on last week's video, especially for this, because I really enjoyed reading all of those things. I do read all of the comments. Don't you make no mistake. It takes up a lot of my days sometimes, but it's good stuff, and I appreciate it. Now we come to the lightning round for today, which is good because we spent a lot of time on those two questions. Ed Archard says, also responding to last week's video, biggest gimmick in the knife world is this newfangled steel you see nowadays. We got by with a fresh flake of flint just fine back in the day. This could almost be a most serious question.
I think we found the oldest person on the internet.
But think about it like this. Take your flint. If you added a little bit of steel, like this SE Fire steel, you could make sparks. You could create fire with your knife, with your flint. People nowadays that complain about people using the spine of their knives to strike a ferro rod to make fire, think about it. We've been using our sharp edges and steel and along with that to make fire for like as long as we've been people, pretty much. So it's hardly a new thing, actually.
Hardly.
I just made that connection. I just thought about that.
I can see the gears turning.
Is there steam coming out of my ears right now? There you go. Gimmick. Pshaw. Next lightning round question is from Kevin. Are there knife makers that use the pommel or the butt end of a full tang knife as a fire striking point? Maybe more thicker, longer for several years instead of the back of the spine for fire striking. Sure, got a couple right here. Two that come to mind immediately are the Tops Fieldcraft, the Brothers of Bushcraft knife. There's several versions of this. Comes with this notch in the extended pommel here at the back, known as the Shango notch, explicitly made for scraping a ferro rod. It's a good knife besides. Another one that comes to mind is from Lion Steel, the B41 Bushcraft, even though I don't really think of it as a bushcraft blade, but that's me personally. One of my favorite knives Lion Steel makes though, however. These are really nicely priced. They're around the $150, $160 mark most of the time. Has a Sleipner steel blade, and they've crisped up one of the edges of this extended protruding pommel here at the back. Not the back section here where you might need to put the palm of your hand to do some drilling, but that other section right there. I like it. Both of those are going to be good options for you right there. All right, next up, Gmuck says, hey DCA, I recently ordered a Dragonfly Salt in H1, but I received H2. Is it better? So we had H1 here on this Autonomy. H2 is kind of what Spyderco is going to from the H1. And as I understand it, the reason for it is not because of a performance difference, but it was more to do with a supply issue. They were able to work with, I believe, a different manufacturer here, or at least with a different formula to kind of get the same results at a more readily available price or supply issue or supply level, whatever. Pardon me for stumbling over that. But the upshot of it is, it's basically just a new name. It might not be exactly the same as H1, but in terms of performance, both edge retention and stain resistance, toughness and everything, should be pretty much the same. So nothing to worry about there. All right, and now we come to our actual last question of the day, which is, of course, our most serious question. And this plays into the first question we had today. Last week we had someone saying, gentlemen don't carry knives. Well, I think they do. That's why I devoted a whole section to talking about a certain subsegment of gentlemen's knives. So Caesar Avila says, what does the most fanciest man use in the most fanciest restaurant to become the most interesting man in the world? I have to say, Caesar, if you got to ask, it's not working for you. Because you can't become the most interesting man in the world. You either are or you aren't. And if you are the most interesting man in the world, whatever knife you're using becomes interesting as a result. It's not going to work in the opposite direction. Well, that's all we have for today, folks. Let me know if you have some alternate answers down in the comments section. And if you have questions, you can also put those in the comments section, and maybe we'll get to feature it in a future episode. If you want to get your hands on any of these knives, links in the description. You know the drill. Check them out. Click those. It'll take you to KnifeCenter.com. And of course, don't forget about our Knife Rewards program, because if you're buying one of these knives today, it'd sure be nice to earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's Thomas behind the camera, and we're signing off. See you next time. Because if you're the most interesting man in the world, you make the knife interesting, not vice versa.
I hear he prefers a case because of the 2 X's.
Oh.
You look thirsty.